Can everyone hear me okay? This is Shirley Acevedo from Latino U College Access.
We hear you. Can you guys hear me? Estefany Carmona with Urban.
Yes.
Good to see you again, Estefany. Jorge Morales from Team Take Charge.
Hola, Jorge.
Hey, Jorge. Lazar Treschan from Here to Here.
Hola, Lazar. Good.
Hola, buenas.
Buenas. Everybody sounds nice and clear.
So Lazar, so it's going to be a slideshow and then questions are going to be asked to the panelists, or what is the run? Because I'm not sure what the rundown of today will be.
Yeah, so there should be an email that Diana sent. I think she resent it maybe last night, yesterday at around, if you want to search, what time was that? At 6:26 p.m. with a little rundown of our timeline. So Diana will do a short 3-minute introduction. I have 8 minutes to so we're putting out this report next week, and I'll just go through sort of the key findings really about Latino students driving college enrollment, but these increases in non-completion, that we talk to a bunch of young people and think that engaging young people in sort of real world and work-based learning can help overcome that, on top of this foundation of academics and strong academics and holistic supports. Very touch on sort of what our agenda, policy, and action steps are moving forward, and then transition to each of you. So you'll be first. I'll ask you a couple questions about Urban Assembly and your work there, about work-based learning. Then Jorge, then Shirley, and is Senator Martinez joining us as well?
I'm trying to check on. Yeah, I'm trying to check.
And then we do about 10 minutes of questions.
Lazar, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you clear.
Okay, cool. Do you see the screen at all or no?
I still don't.
It was sharing earlier, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna check in with Senator Martinez, but
should I try to share it from my end, just as a backup?
Yeah, let's try yours. Let's see what's happening.
All right, give me 1 second to make sure I've saved this in the right place. Okay, so it says I can share from a file. If there isn't any attached video, please ask organizers to upload a video before sharing. Okay, I can't do that.
No, you don't need to. Share the screen is the best way.
Okay, application window, Chrome tab. All right, let me bring it up in a Chrome tab then. Okay, for that to happen, I have to open it in Google. So you guys seeing this? All right,
Yep.
So I have to open it in Google Slides, even though it's a deck. So sometimes the formatting can be off. Ooh.
I think it should be fine.
Looks pretty good. Yeah, I don't see any format problems.
Yeah. Do you want to make it just a full screen so that way?
Oh, so you're not seeing that as full screen?
We're seeing it as edit, like an edit version of it. So if you go to view.
Oh, okay. It's maybe in present. Like that?
Yeah, perfect. Now we see it.
Okay, great. So you see it. I still want to minimize it, so I have the Run the World screen up as well. So let me then just move this over here. Okay, I think that will work. So if I'm sharing the screen, I can just pop through. Great, wonderful. So should I just leave that up for now?
Yeah, I mean, do we want to start with the slides up? We can, since they're already up and ready to go. But Lazar, I was thinking that when we jump to the questions, that we would take the PowerPoint just so that the speakers can, so that we can see more of your faces.
Sure.
But, let me see.
Yeah, and I can also wait until you give me the go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of like go through some logistics here. So basically, if you're having trouble, as I was having, you can leave the room. There's a little red door on the bottom left corner. You can leave the room and then re-enter. You can also refresh the page and then re-enter where you did the join a speaker session. The other thing is that when the session is over, when we're just saying goodbye, like that's what you'll have to click to log off. Lazar would be the one sharing the screen, so we don't have to necessarily worry about that. And then if we, for example, like in my case, like if I take off my video and my mute, then I will just. So you won't have to do that. However, I don't know, something comes up that you have to like step away. Then you can just completely mute and get off the video, and you'll completely disappear. I'll manage some of the questions and then take care of the Q&A and just kind of like direct them to the panelists. And as Lazar is mentioning, basically I'll just do like a brief welcoming and then pass it on to like Lazar, and then Lazar would just kind of start some of the conversation around through the PowerPoint, like what have we been finding, kind of state the problem, state the all of the other items. Like I said, the PowerPoint is pretty extensive, but we're not going to go through every single writing that it's in it. It really is meant to give participants just an idea of what we're going to be talking about. And then the other thing is that we're definitely going to highlight that this is really it's going to be a published brief that's coming out next week. Lazar has been working and myself on getting this out. And so really this is meant to be sort of like an exclusive of the brief. And so we'll kind of talk a little bit about that, but essentially your perspective and the questions is what we would love to really concentrate on. So are there any particular questions on Lazar? I don't know if you had anything else you want to add or.
No, nothing to add. That sounds good. I'll run through the deck quickly. In terms of timekeeping, should I just, I'll let people know they have, it looks like about 8 minutes each, and I will maybe throw up 2 fingers for 2-minute warning and then 1 minute for 1 minute warning. And I'll let people know that I'm not setting up the peace sign. I'll let attendees know that's a signal.
Like super, like I'm going to try to see if I can move the other way so that I can see more light because it's so dark in here. Yeah, and I wanted to say that, Lazar, the questions are really meant to be guidance for you and for the speakers to answer. However, if you are really seeing some, like, if Shirley is mentioning something and you want to kind of go off of that and ask questions about that, that's fine. In terms of timekeeping, I know that you'll do a good job of like kind of monitoring the time, but just make sure that you're leaving at least 5 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. And you'll see a countdown clock at the end that says you have 5 minutes left for the session. Don't worry about that. That's just really meant to tell you you have 5 minutes. But if we go over a little bit, it's okay. Like we're not gonna get kicked off, or we're not gonna be doing anything. So I just wanted to clarify that you'll see that, and nothing will happen. It's just to tell you that you have 5 minutes on the schedule, but if we run over, it's okay.
Can I ask a question, Lazar, for you in particular? If you can just, what do you mean by where does work-based learning play a critical role? Like, do you mean like in the student development aspect of it, or where does it play within a school?
Great question, and you will hear that answer in the presentation. However, really just, both in high school in terms of preparing young people to know why they're going to college, sort of what experiences they can have in high school to sort of have them make an informed choice. That's, they're consuming college rather than being consumed by it. And then once in college, internships, making sure that, someone's major is connected to their career interest and things like that. Just allowing in for experiences that allow young people, different types of experiences to sort of connect what they're doing in a school building to what their interests are for the day they leave the school building.
So Lazar, I'm going to just start the introduction and then the panelists by name, and then I'll give them a chance to talk, and as they're talking, whenever they're done, start with the PowerPoint. Okay. So we will start in a little bit. We'll give people a few minutes to to join. Oh, the last thing is if you can mute yourselves whenever you're not speaking, just so that there's no feedback. And most of the time it's fine, but it should be fine. So we will begin in like about 10 seconds. Is everybody feeling ready? Okay. If I disappear from the screen, don't worry about it. I'll come back on board as soon as we can. Okay. Give me 1 second. Let me. Okay, we'll do in 5 seconds. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Diana Cruz with Hispanic Federation as the Education Policy Director. Thank you so much for joining our session. We are going to be focusing on the New York State Latinx college completion crisis among many of my dear colleagues and partners. We wanted to just kind of start a little bit with an agenda on what we're going to be speaking about. One of the things that we're going to highlight is particularly some data that our program was able to analyze and collect through the 2008 to 2018 Latinx college students and really looking at their completion rates. We also want to focus a little bit more directly in making a case for work-based learning and how is that a critical approach to support Latinx students to ensure that they have a successful post-secondary pathway. We will also share specific actions that we envision pursuing in the next couple of years as we're giving this new set of challenges throughout the pandemic, the racial inequities that we have been seeing even before the pandemic, but now we cannot deny they are there. And so this is going to inform a lot of our policy agenda in the future. We will also take some questions from the audience. I want to invite everybody to add some of the questions through the chat box, but also we will have an opportunity to bring you on stage so that you can ask your questions directly to the panelists. And then finally, we want to invite all of you to our full release of this presentation. Here to Hear It and the Lead Coalition, powered by the Hispanic Federation, will be publishing a release focusing on this session, and we'll give you some details at the end of the session so that you can join us specifically to be part of that. With that, I do want to introduce our partners in this. Again, this work could not have been done without the support of Lazar Treschan from Here to Hear It. If you want to say hi, Lazar.
Hi.
And as our panelists, I want to invite particularly Shirley Acevedo Buontempo from Latino U College Access, who's also part of the Lead Coalition and has been a partner of Hispanic Federation for a long time. I want to invite Estefany Carmona from Urban Assembly. Hi. And then, of course, one of our dear students, Jorge Morales from Teens Take Charge. Thank you so much for being here. We are excited to engage in an important conversation, not only around college completion, but also what can we be doing to incorporate work-based learning in times of a pandemic and post-pandemic. So with that, Lazar, do you want to kick it off?
Hi, everyone. Great to see you. And thank you, Diana. Real pleasure to have worked with you on this and a real pleasure to be on the panel with so many great colleagues like Shirley, Estefany, and Jorge. So I'll go quickly, but I'll present some of the data and research that the Hispanic Federation Lead Coalition and us at Here to Hear have done over the past year to really get the conversation going. So here's our panelists again with even headshots that look almost as good as they look on screen right now. So what we really did was we started digging into some college enrollment data, and I'll just jump right into the data. One thing we found is that increases in college enrollment over the past 10 years are really being driven by one subgroup of students, and that's Latinx students in New York. Traditional populations that have been more college going, like white students and Asian students, actually have seen their college going decline over the past 10 years. Black students have increased a little bit, but the real drive in increase in college going, which is both a revenue source for our state and for those colleges, the people that are really driving college enrollment and keeping those colleges strong has been Latinx students with huge gains over the past 10 years. among the 18 to 24 population and the older population as well. But what we're seeing at the same time is a real college completion crisis. So here in the red, you see that college completion rates, or those red rates over the past 10 years, have gone up across the board. But really being, again, that is driven by Latinx students. So these young people are, we're telling them to go to college, we're telling them to prepare for college, and they're doing that. They're doing what they're being told to do in school. But they're not really getting the support to succeed. And now 1 in 4 Latinx 18 to 24-year-olds who are not in school are actually college non-completers. And they really see experiences of failure, and oftentimes they've used up their financial aid. And in a lot of cases are coming out of it with debt on top of that. I see a comment from Pedro Perez in the chat around sharing the data. We'll be releasing this in a report next week, so that'll be at your fingertips soon. And again, those consequences are huge, right? So in blue, you see the earnings for people who have started college and not completed, and in orange, you see the data for completers. Huge gains across populations. A little less for the Latinx community, and we can talk about what that means as well in terms of what the earnings premium is. But huge gains to completion and huge consequences for not completion. So I'll be quick, but once we started digging into the data with the first we met with the lead coalition organizations and started talking it through some of the challenges that they saw, and then really met with dozens of young people, both completers and non-completers, and really identified 4 challenges. They raised real 4 challenges for us. Assistance in figuring out why they were in college. A lot of young people were going to college without sort of knowing why they were there, and then they got there. We know the data says the more likely you are to major in liberal arts, and liberal arts at a 2-year school, the more likely you are to non-complete. A lot of young people didn't know who they were, so they're in college. They're paying all this money without a real knowledge of self, again, connecting to why they're in college and what they want to do. We heard a lot about financial aid, not just the finances themselves, but the ability to navigate financial aid and deal with paperwork, and then supports to keep them on track while they're in college. So work-based, we turn to work-based learning, which is what we do at Here to Here, is really try to focus on, because young people through that, and those are internships, apprenticeships, career exploration, applied degree programs, really allow young people to gain that sense of self, have a real world sort of engagement and tangible application of what they're doing. Gain a social network. How many of us found our jobs through people and not through listings and things like that? And real exposure to things outside the classroom that can really unlock their skills and interests both inside and outside the classroom. So again, our report, which I'll show you a little of here, is really these voices of young people, as you'll see on the list, really, telling us things that we thought that internships, more applied learning, more hands-on learning could solve. In those, work-based learning helps you decide a major because you've had some job experiences and know what you want to do and what you don't want to do. You really have a better understanding of who you are, what you like to do, what kind of setting you want to be in a ways that just talking to a counselor, if you are lucky enough to have one, can't do. Real experiences like internships do a much better job of that. We've heard so much from young people, and this won't be news to anyone, about the challenges of paperwork and financial aid, especially from young people whose parents aren't experienced, aren't English language speakers, aren't experienced dealing with paperwork. It can be so daunting for so many of us right now, who likes to do their taxes. But we found that having a job and an internship where you have to fill out tax forms, where you have to do paperwork, does really equip young people with a little bit more confidence in that realm. And then really staying on track. There's been tons of data about the ASAP program and other programs. There are a lot of supports that we can do to keep young people on track and staying connected to their longer term goals, like through internships, through applied learning, makes it more likely, because young people aren't going to not complete because, lack of motivation or because they don't see how it connects to what they want to do. So our solution is really, last couple minutes here, a comprehensive work-based learning plan for young people, both in high school and college, to support college success, on top of making sure everyone has rigorous coursework and holistic supports to stay on track. In the area of work-based learning, we're really pushing for high schools to use some more of the alternative assessments and models, like the CDAS, which is something we can talk about for a full Regents diploma. increasing and expanding SYP, the school-based model, so every high school student gets to do an internship. And in the longer term, thinking about reducing, as the Regents reviews its exit requirements, reducing required Regents and substituting in more real-world activities. At CUNY and SUNY, expanding credit for work experience, 70% of college students work. Most of that is not happening. 2%, I believe, is in fields connected to their major. But we know that everybody gains skills in those jobs. So what if there are seminars to take your part-time job, package those learnings into something that is really structured and you can reflect on? And really pushing CUNY and SUNY to do more in the applied degree field and concentrate resources into those types of programming, and making career centers not the thing you visit on the last day of school, but the thing you visit on the first day of school. And then in the other areas, the LEAD Coalition has long been a great champion for making sure there's equitable, advanced coursework to all students. It's not an either or, academics or work. They have to be not a balancing act, but something that are held up together. And the LEAD Coalition has put together a real framework for this, and they're within our REACH framework. And mental health, we know continues to be, and more than ever, a huge issue. So making sure counseling and mental health options are really strong for young people, not both proactively and then reactively in response to discipline. Making sure parents and families are really engaged as well. So I've done. There'll be more here that we can talk about. And I've done enough talking now, so I want to pass it over to some of our incredible panelists who are doing a lot of this work on the ground. Estefany Carmona from the Urban Assembly, I really would love you to talk a little bit about what you're doing in the high school space to prepare young people for college, and how work-based learning is a part of your approach, and how you've seen that work. And I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Lazar, and thank you everyone that's joining us today. With work-based learning, I just want to give you guys a little background. I am from the Urban Assembly Network, and our network is very driven to advance students economically and socially, in public education. And we want to make sure that we're giving quality professional development to all school leadership, and that's very data-driven. When it comes to work-based learning, we're taking several initiatives depending on, high schools, whatever it is, but holistically, we want to make sure that WBL lives within curriculums, lives within advisories, and lives within after school. We want to make sure that we give school students and teachers, counselors, whoever it is, opportunities to take on career awareness, career exploration, career preparation, and planning. I think the overall goal when we're pushing for WBL, we want our students to be the people that decide their career pathway. So with WBL right now, we are currently creating because of COVID, we're creating a lot of work-based learning remotely. So specific examples could be post-secondary fairs. We want students to know the different colleges and non-college options that are available to them, and making sure that they can talk to the students so they can make that decision. We're also creating project-based learning internships that help our students not only develop the technical skills, but the life skills that they will need for the future. When it comes to work-based learning, we definitely want to create a space where the students create post-secondary action plans. So when they do get to college, we know that they're making that decision from themselves, and the families feel comfortable knowing that based on these experiences, they move forward.
Thank you so much. We're going to turn now to next up is so I should have had this up, is Shirley. But I do want to note that we've been joined by State Senator Monica Martinez, who will be speaking on the panel as well. Not just any legislator, but a former educator. So a couple claps for that, and a graduate of various institutions, educational institutions in New York State. So thanks for joining, and we're excited to hear your comments. But next, let's turn it to Shirley for a second, and I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about. Actually, let's go to Jorge first. And Jorge, I'd love you to talk about, now you've done internships with our organization Here to Here, and you helped lead the Save SYEP campaign this past summer, which just did incredible work to save 35,000 summer jobs for young people. Experiences that we hope they can use to put themselves on a great post-secondary pathway. So I'd love for you to talk about that, or any reactions to the data, or Estefany's comments.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this past summer, I was lucky enough to have been able to participate in this internship, which was a joint venture between Here to Here and Teens Take Charge. And I'm just extremely grateful for being able to partake in that experience, as it truly enabled me to devote myself to the important campaign, that was the Save SYP campaign. Trying to save the largest summer youth employment program in the nation is no easy task, and we were really lucky to maintain 35,000 spots. But most importantly, we were able to set a precedent to include the youth in the voice of these policies. And I think that's something that Teens Take Charge has truly been focused on, and ensuring that the youth are being heard. To the data, it's no surprise. It's something that I've also been living through, myself being an immigrant student and being Latino. It's something that a system that kind of plays against you. So it's very much something that I'm living on at the moment. A lot of the things that you mentioned, Lazar, and a lot of the things that the report has mentioned are things that resonate with me. The difficulty, my parents having language barriers, me kind of being able to navigate through this by myself and with some help of my school as well. But it being a challenging thing within itself.
So thanks, and you guys have been very short and sweet. So I want to go to Estefany quickly back for 1 second before we move to Shirley. How do you see, a lot of people think that, summer and high school are different, and I know you guys of Urban Assembly have done a lot to integrate summer experiences with high school in a way that uses those couple months a year to really help young people think about their futures and not just their presence in terms of, typically, when I worked at DYCD 20 years ago, it was still a program to sort of get kids off the street in the summer, or an income transfer program. How do you guys think about it a little bit differently in sort of a future-oriented program?
So as Lazar mentioned, with Urban Assembly, we created a very project-based learning internship. And we were trying to focus, knowing that we're moving into this virtual world, how can we make sure a student is getting paid? Because that is one of the things financially. It helps students when it comes to, social and economic mobility. That's one. But two, we need to make sure that the students feel comfortable in a space that we're moving in based on labor market. Like thinking about the labor market right now, where are we going to? What is driving our students? So we did a 6-week internship, and hopefully this could be scalable, nationwide, where we had students doing project-based learning either alone or within groups, and it was basically tailored to what their interests were. So if it was like a social media project, what is the social media audit? This is one specific example. But we wanted to make sure that the students are able to do research, to be able to create a presentation, and also communicate what they're trying to do in this audit, and they had different mentors giving them constructive feedback. It wasn't like, oh, your presentation was too short. It's like more of like, tell me more about your research. Tell me more about this or that. We want to make sure those life skills are connected to the internships. Not saying that wasn't happening in in-person internships, but we definitely want to make sure that our schools are now aware, like, hey, maybe we could do credited programs about project-based learning. Maybe we have more when it comes to these social and life skills that will drive exploration, awareness, and then maybe potentially planning and networking. I know a lot of the students with that dealt with a lot of the mentors, they're still in contact through LinkedIn. And that was another great thing. Students were welcome to LinkedIn. They were like, what is this? This is not Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. This is something where it's going to help my future. So we really want to take work-based learning. We want to take internships into another different lens that will be helping students even with their
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think the transition from Snapchat to LinkedIn is called growing up, and none of us really want to do it. Jorge, we're still on your time. So any reactions to that in terms of how your personal experience recently of having done internships, either with us or others, have informed what you're thinking about your future?
Yeah, tremendously. So being able to encompass myself into this campaign has definitely provided me much perspective in the various aspects of policy development and whatnot, and has made me much more interested in public policy. So it's something that I'm definitely looking to further pursue. And just to the comment of the program, Teens Take Charge ran a program ourselves this summer, and again, kind of connecting a lot of the youth into many of the components that entails advocacy. The youth was able to present their advocacy campaigns to the public advocate, and that public advocate just was extremely blown away, but also very critical of their work. And we also did create LinkedIn accounts with the youth, and it was amazing to have them have this reaction. So definitely huge kudos to you as well.
Awesome. So Shirley, I'd love to hear from you a little bit, to speak broadly as your reactions to the data, to the research. And, you've done so much over the years to support Latinx college enrollment, success, retention. Love to hear how some of these data and some of these ideas integrate with some of the stuff that you've been working on for so long.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Lazar. At Latino U College Access, our mission is to empower first-gen Latino students on their journey to and through college so that they can fulfill their potential. We guide students by providing them with culturally relevant programming, ensuring that they navigate the higher ed system so that they can enroll in schools that meet their academic and financial needs. But we don't stop there. We make sure that we stay with our scholars as they transition to college, remain in college, ensuring that retention is maintained and that they graduate. We've built a career readiness program within our mission to ensure that students not only graduate college, but graduate college with an awareness and a preparation to enter their chosen careers. And we see that as critical in helping them to understand what is the purpose of this education, where am I going, and what are the opportunities that are available to me. I am not surprised by the data that you've presented. I think that certainly there is great desire, commitment, and motivation among Latinx students, particularly first-gen students, to enroll in college. But the process of college admissions, the complexity of financial aid, the lack of social capital in understanding the myriad of majors and areas of study that exist and that are available to you can often trip up even the most talented and motivated student. And so as an organization, we look at the programs that we deliver in giving students personal coaching, support, in college admissions, assistance with the financial aid application process, and assistance in preparing for careers by conducting resume writing workshops, interview prep, LinkedIn workshops, helping them to build their LinkedIn pages. And one of the programs that we're very excited about is our corporate partnership, where we introduce students to our corporate partners and they can meet other first-gen professionals who have walked in their shoes and who have shared their experience as first-gen college graduates, and they see their future in front of them. That can be very motivating and very inspiring. So as an organization, we recognize the students, first-gen Latino students and low-income students need assistance and need support. Not only in getting into college, but in staying, and also what happens afterwards. And so as an organization, we've committed ourselves to this work.
And how do you see, though, thank you for that. And how do you see, one thing we hear a little bit in doing, pushing for sort of expanded, work and career orientation to our schools is sometimes the schools feel, well, that's not our job. And then sometimes, so many CBOs, community-based organizations, have done this work powerfully, but then they're sometimes kept out of the sort of the formal education space, either the K-12 space or post-secondary. And what we try to tell them is that no, this isn't about moving work-based learning out of your expertise and into the post-secondary space, but this is an opportunity for partnership and connection. It takes a village. And
Absolutely.
So how do you see that happening in your work and the role that community organizations can play in supporting this type of work to push into post-secondary, rather have it be isolated?
Well, as a CBO that serves the Latino community, we partner with local school districts and with our high schools in the work that we do. And so the scholars that join our program are nominated by the schools, and we collaborate with guidance department to let them know what we are working on with the students. in addition to partnering with local corporations as well. And I think they see us as an opportunity to bridge the gap in college counseling and advising services that schools provide, that allows us to work with students in a more intense individual one-on-one basis so that it can propel them through this complex process, and also help have conversations with students about career advising. One of the things that we've noted, of course, is it's the typical first-gen experience. What do you want to be? A doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, right? It's those three things. That's where the money is. And even if you are flunking out of science, you're going to be a doctor. But to have students understand that there are a myriad of career options available, and to have them explore what their strengths and weaknesses are academically and personally, what their preferences are, and let them know that it's okay to change your mind. We communicate to our scholars, what's the statistic? College students change their majors at least 5 times, or there's and so it's the first year you go, a lot of students go in with one perspective, one objective, and they realize that, whoa, wait a minute, maybe I'm not really cut out to be a doctor. And we give them permission to say that that's okay. Let's identify another area of strength, another major. This doesn't mean that you need to quit college. It doesn't mean that you are a failure. It just means that you've identified your strengths. And that comes, again, from the work that you're doing in work-based internships, exposing students to internships, but also in giving them permission to grow and giving them permission to become self-aware. And I think that's really a big part of the trust and the relationship that we as a CBO have with students, and conversations that we can have with students that their parents cannot have with them, because their parents don't have that social capital. They don't know the career industries that exist. So if your dad is a laborer, how is your dad going to advise you at working in finance, or getting into, the medical industry? So we have to recognize it, and that's what we mean by cultural relevance. Meet students where they are and recognize the information that they don't have. They don't know what they don't know. And so we think it's important to fill those gaps in knowledge and not see it as a deficit, but just it's a simple lack of exposure. And it's amazing what happens once you open those doors up to information and you introduce students to the possibilities that exist.
Wow, a few wonderful points there. The social capital point is really well taken around networks, and so much of work-based learning and internships is getting young people out of their social network. There's so much power to what we call bonding social capital within groups, but bridging social capital across groups is just as powerful. And a lot of research on what we call the strength of weak ties, which is it's not the people you know very closely that can hook you up with that extra job, but it's that loose connection you have, your cousin's friend who works at a law firm. And we've conducted research at Here to Here to show that the more low income you are and the more likely you are to be Black or Latino, that you're just a much more constrained set of careers in your social network. So how can work-based learning open that up? Another point, yeah, please.
And also in speaking about networking, one of the characteristics that is so common to first-gen students is this lack of understanding that networking is a strength and that it is something that is commonly done. I've had students that come to me and say, I feel like I'm asking them for a favor. I'm uncomfortable to ask for an informational interview or a call. And it's part of our cultura. We're like, we're going to do it alone. We don't need anybody. We don't have, I'm not going to call in favors. It's not a favor. People want to help you, and you're giving them an opportunity to help you. So really, we do networking workshops where we teach students how to network using M&Ms. Like, here's a conversation. Here's an M&M, talk about this topic. And really having a chance to exchange information with each other, because you don't know how to network when you grow up as a first-gen student, particularly in the Latino community. You're accustomed to doing it all yourself.
Yeah, those schmoozing conversations. My wife is a executive at Opportunities for a Better Tomorrow, and I can't tell you how many mocktails I've been to. Really just working with young people on their schmoozing skills, which we know are super important. So the other point you made, I think, is a great transition to Senator Martinez, which, and again, just so glad that you're here. You sort of raised this idea of like changing careers, and this idea that, you know, what we don't want to do is, because you're poor, because you're more black or brown, means you're locked into something at an earlier age. We want to both balance the complete freedom, but you know what we found is that career and technical education, work-based learning, internships, they actually don't do that. They give young people more efficacy and agency. But we have found at the policy level and at the government level, you know, there was such a push for college for all versus career that we've sort of had to disabuse public officials of this notion that you know, and Senator Martinez being a former educator, I'd love to hear you think about, first of all, just that sort of balance that we want to strike. You know, is it a political problem, this idea about talking about career exploration and within the college setting? Because the research says that it supports it, but we do know that sometimes people want to be tagged as being, you know, anti-college and being pro-career for certain types of kids.
Do you want me to comment on that?
Yeah, I'd love you to talk about, you know, that sort of political challenge, and then I've got a couple of more specific questions for the work.
Of course. And first of all, thank you so much. And, you know, you just hit the nail on the head when you said that culturally it's so difficult for us sometimes to ask for that help, because we are, and I say we because we always say we, right? I think that's the pronoun that we always use as well, is that we've been taught to be independent. We've been taught to really stand our ground and do what we need to do to get through things. And actually, I was just talking with someone here in my office. So not that I was being rude, but we were talking about what we're listening here. And, you know, sometimes being the first generation Hispanic, you know, of a family member going to college for the first time and being that trailblazer for the younger ones coming in that family is also very cumbersome sometimes, right? Because you don't know, you didn't have like a sibling prior or anyone to guide you. So for example, with my family, I am the youngest of four, and two out of the three went to college, and one went into career readiness, right? So to college into career readiness, which is what we're discussing in the balance. And honestly, I can say this as an educator, and I don't have a problem saying this, but college is not for every single person. It's not. And and we've always been in that bubble where we're forcing kids to go to college. And when you force a child to go to college and they're taking out loans, they're going away, whatever it may be, adding financial burdens to them and to their families, to then realize this is not for me. And that's why sometimes I like to push the 2-year route, right? See it, go to a community college and see how that works. For me, when I was going after, from high school to college, I knew I wanted to go to college. I knew that I wanted to, and you just said it before, become a doctor, but I want to become a veterinary, right? I want to become a doctor of animals. But it was still something that I wanted to do, and I knew that I had to go to college to pursue that. But it's not for everybody, right? People learn differently. People are able to do the same exact thing in 2 different pathways. And I think we need to take that away. And I don't know if that's a political problem, but I think it's more of a cultural problem, honestly, and societal, right? Because we can't be guided by society's norm, and the norm back in the day and to some extent now is to go to college. And I think we need to tell our kids, our young individuals, that it's okay if you don't go to college, but you should also look into a career, right? Because obviously you need to sustain your family, you need to sustain yourself, and you need to have income coming in. And you can still be successful. Look, we have all these unions, this trade, you can go into trades, or you can go into business without even having to go get an MBA, right? There's so many different outlets that we can go into. And what we're seeing a lot of schools doing now is transitioning into career technical education, right? Where they very well know that this child is not going to go to college. So why are we going to push that child to go to college when we know that child doesn't want to go, and that child may very well be more successful going a career path? And we need to really know who our students are. We need to listen to them. We need to educate them on the different possibilities that this world has, right? So I don't think it's a political issue, honestly. I think it's more of societal and home, right? And having the support system at home that says, you know what, you can also do this and still be successful.
So that's a wonderful point, and there's been some great in the conversation around it in the chat. Pete Diamantes, a New York City teacher, like my public school teacher, like my parents, so I will call you Mr. Diamantes. Notes that college may not be for everyone right after high school, and sometimes you'll need to take some time to explore, and maybe then you're pursuing a vocational degree or a tech degree, and ideally, the system that we want to create has multiple pathways to well-paying, family-sustaining careers, whether that's college right after high school, whether it's high school and some sort of apprenticeship with that combines college, whether it's working for a while, figuring out what you want to do and who you want to be. So I think you're right. There's a play of cultural expectations. My abuela in Uruguay went to her grave telling people I was an economista in Uruguay, even though I never did that. But there was a lot of I had to break it to her that I wasn't an economist. I did research and data, but there is a lot of pressure around those those expectations. So working both culturally in the home and as well. And so Senator Martinez,
if you don't mind me just kind of put this in too, many of our Hispanic families, Latino families who emigrate to the United States, they do it for the reason of a better life and a better education, right? So I think also culturally, we say to ourselves, well, we came to this country for that American dream, so you can go to, and have a quality education because we couldn't provide that for you in our native country, right? And I think that's another push that as to why we tend to push our Hispanic children more, right, into the route of college, because this is the reason why we came, right? No, the reason why we came is to build a better life and, yes, fulfill that American dream. And that American dream, you can get there with different paths, right? And I think that's another issue that kind of drives us to kind of say, no, you got to go to college.
So that's exactly the data that your point is really borne out in that data. Latinx students, especially the last 10 years, are going to college more than anyone. The increases are completely driven by them. They are, quote unquote, going to college. Whether they know why they're going to college, whether they're majoring in something that they actually enjoy. In fact, they're more likely to major in liberal arts, which in some cases is strong, but in some cases is, I don't know what to major in. So what can we do, Senator Martinez, before I open up? At the policy and state level, there's a talk of the Regents Review, and we've been advocating for reducing some of the exam assessments, particularly global studies, and including more real world applications and helping students make what we call an informed post-secondary choice. That you're leaving high school knowing what you want to do and why based on two things: a knowledge of who you are and a knowledge of the world out there. And if you could have assessments that got to that, maybe those would be better than the global studies regions. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we can do at the state level and then open things up.
That's a great question. And I was a history teacher, right? And global was one of those matters that students have a hard time with, right? You're literally compacting centuries of global history into a year, and not even a year, right? Into 185 days, I think it is, right? And you're cramming everything that's happened in our world in those days. And then you expect the child to sit in a hot gymnasium or auditorium to take that Regents exam at the end of the year. And it's, I believe in assessment. I'm not going to lie to you, right? It's how you measure, you measure data. But I think we need to kind of look at the assessments, right? Because unfortunately, assessments are not going to go away. If you need to go to college, you got to take a test. If you're getting employment somewhere, you're probably going to take a test, a writing sample, whatever it may be. So there are certain skills that still need to be provided for our students. At the state level, we have done a rigorous reform in how we tie student assessment and teacher performance. Look, a child may have a really bad day that one day to take that exam, and we all know we have our bad days. They could be doing so well the entire year, and then they come in that day. You don't even know what's going on in that world of that child. They may not have had breakfast that day. Their parents may have had an argument. You just don't know where they're coming from. And then you expect them to sit there for 3 hours and take this test. And that one day could be the day that they don't do well on this test. And now this child doesn't do well. So, a direct representation of the teacher, which is not, right? So we really need to decouple the assessment and the success of the teacher as well. And in terms of assessment, I completely agree with you. What is global studies going to do for an individual that wants to build homes, right? I mean, unless you know how, you talk about building a Rome, right? And construct, but it's not going to play a role in their new life of construction. So I completely agree with you. And that's why I believe we should start looking at the education system as a whole. And that's why before I said certain school districts have CTE programs, where we need to see, okay, well, this child is not going to go to college, so let's have a program where they could get involved into a possible career, possible trade. And you can have that within a school building. You can have that within a school district. But it's just really overhauling the entire education system. And sometimes we worry about that, right? We worry about change. Change is something sometimes that people don't want to see, but change sometimes is good if you do it the right way. And what we could do at the state level is hear from our constituents, hear from our school districts, hear from our students, right? They're the ones that are going through it. They're the ones that sit down every single day in the classroom. No one is listening to them because no one is asking them the questions that we need to be asking. And those questions are, what do you want to do with your life, right? We say, what do you want to do when you grow up? All right, well, what I wanted to do when I grew up could be very different when I actually do grow up. Right? Some people actually keep the same thing. I still want to be a veterinarian, right? But if somebody wanted to be a veterinarian 30 years ago and then became a developer, it's just completely different. So we need to really focus on the whole child and what that child wants. So like I said, I in terms of assessment, I think we need to kind of scale down on assessment based on where that child is going. And that is why certain school districts with their CTE programs, it's kind of, what I would also believe in and what I've been pushing for, and the regions is kind of doing this right now, the Board of Regents, is developing another type of diploma, right? Where it doesn't have to be a Regents diploma and you don't have to take those Regents courses to graduate high school. Let's provide a diploma where you did graduate high school, but you took career readiness, right? I mean, you can do both.
Absolutely, and the CDOS, the Career Development Occupational Studies credential, actually allows you to get a full Regents diploma while taking only 4 Regents if you do a lot of the self-exploration and sort of work-based learning activities and internships, and that's a really in line with what you're talking about, and we're now that is available to students, but it's not something that is widely pushed. So I want to take a couple questions from the audience before we're moving quickly here. So Diana Paloma, there was a question that you had. Do you want to grab the mic? If not, I can read it out. I'll give you a few seconds to grab the mic.
Diana Paloma, if you're still in our session, you can just grab the mic. It's right next to the chat box. Grab the mic if you want to ask your question directly to the panelists. Otherwise, we can read it out. If anybody else wants to also ask a question directly, they can grab the mic and then we can bring them on stage. Maybe Diana Paloma is not.
So she asked a good question. Sorry?
No, go ahead, Lazar.
She asked a good question about, which I think is great, and this gets to a lot of the things we've been talking about. How can we, we want to, college may not be for everybody, may not be for everyone right after high school, but if we do see an income gap, income gap we showed was for college non-completers, but there is also an income gap for people who don't even start college versus those with a degree. How can we still provide good jobs and fair income for those students? And I think this gets to what Senator Martinez talked about. But Shirley, why don't you weigh in?
Yeah, I'd love to address that. Because as a college access organization that focuses primarily on working with students who are four-year college bound, as demonstrated by their academic achievements and motivation, we hear that a lot. And, the reality is that I think in 2012, Georgetown University issued a report indicating that 65% of jobs will require post-secondary education by the year 2020. I think that number has gone up slightly to 70% of jobs. What people don't realize is that there was a lot of misunderstanding about what that number meant, right? Does it mean post-secondary four-year degrees, two-year degrees? And the fact is that when we refer to post-secondary requirements for jobs, it's anything from a vocational technical degree to a two-year to a four-year. And so you do have students that perhaps were not, that are not on a four-year college path, but think that this is this is the logical next step. And so they're force-fitting themselves into a college pathway that perhaps they're not academically motivated to pursue. The other thing that's happening is that students enrolled in such large numbers that the schools didn't have the resources and the support to support students that came in with disadvantages in academic preparation or as first-gen students with financial challenges. And so there was no support for them. And so you have what I call dropout farms, where students go in, take the money, thank you, pay tuition, get out, go. You want to make sure that students are enrolling in schools that meet their academic skill sets, that are going to be there to support and nurture them to completion, and are going to make sure they have the financial aid that they need in order to graduate college. And yes, if a student is not interested in going to a four-year institution, they must explore alternatives, because you're not going to make a fair living wage working at McDonald's. You need to be able to find certification, technical, vocational, because the reality is that we're living in a high-tech world that requires some form of extra education beyond high school. What that looks like is up to the student, up to their industry, and up to their financial ability.
Great point. And when we talk about career and preparation and work-based learning, we're not just talking about low-paying jobs, but really how do we get people through an alternative pathway to high-paying work. Estefany, there's a question here from Pedro Perez about, okay, if college isn't for everyone, and we do have these non-completion farms and things where young people are being consumed by college for their tuition rather than them making this informed choice. How do you talk to young people about that choice? You're working with young people in high schools about, look, we have high expectations for you, but that doesn't mean you have to goose step, as Upton Sinclair said, right into college.
I think something that wasn't talked about is how are we not having skill, interest, and career assessments available by 9th or even beforehand. I think that once we start developing those skills and those interests for their students, we can set expectations for them to succeed. And as I said before, when so many counselors, they see a profile of a student and they just jump. They're like, all right, the student does this, this, and that. Let's put them in BS&C. But the student is not really great at learning on their own. And when you're in BS&C, you have to know how to have your personality and learn your schedule and have time management. So just to move forward is having those assessments, and that WBL is not another course. It should be implemented within the curriculums of New York City and New York State specifically. Because if we did have that, students are not just, doing assessments. I'll go back to assessment, but they're not just like focusing on what is my plan. It's more of like, I've done this in this subject. I really am interested. I've done assessments. I've done these experiences. This is what I want to move forward. And then hopefully the college or the school counselor can talk to the student saying, hey, these are your 5 or 6 plans, or whatever, smaller 1 to 2 plans. But the last thing is, when we're talking about our regions, we're talking about anything that helps our students get to college. I don't think we're seeing it in a multicultural lens. And I think that's what's ruining, it's hurting our students making decisions, because it's not for our students. It's not equal for our students. So that definitely is something that's hindering this move to having that post-secondary.
That's amazing. Looks, I'm being told we have a minute and a half left, and if that's the case, although we might be able to go a little bit over, always great to give a student the final word. So Jorge, anything you would reflect on this conversation around, what have you heard and what you're thinking?
I think just definitely echoing a lot of what Estefany just mentioned, that early exploration is really crucial and key to putting all of these pieces together, right? We definitely don't want to discourage students and say, no, you can't go to college. You're not capable of going to college, because some might be more than capable of doing that, right? But ensuring that they're exploring what that might entail at an early age and understanding the different complexities of it is extremely crucial. And that's what's really going to make the difference. And that's kind of what we're pushing for here, right? Ensuring that it starts at an early age, 14, 15-year-olds, and it goes on, and that they have opportunities across the board, right? That's really important. If you go to a 2-year institution, then you don't necessarily have to go to a 4-year. That's not your next step. Here are other options. Like having those options is very crucial, and ensuring that there is some support in that might be through counselors, that might be through better informing parents. My parents, as I mentioned, were really bad, weren't informed at all. I went through the process by myself. And being a first generation student, as many of you have highlighted, is extremely crucial. I'm living through it at the moment, so it's something that I can speak of from them. But yeah, encompassing all of that, having all those options at all those different levels is extremely crucial.
Amazing. Yeah. Options plus information, that's what empowerment looks like. And that's what we want for our young people. Diane, I'm going to turn over to you in case you have any last questions for anyone on the panel, to either close or offer up any guidance before we send people to their next session.
Great. Thank you so much to absolutely each of you for providing this rich conversation. Exactly what you just said, Lazar. It's all about providing the exploration so the students have the options to decide for themselves and for their families what is best for them. Whether it's going to college or going directly to a career or going to a 2-year, career-based learning. And it really starts in middle school, starts in elementary school, and then it goes on. I think one of the biggest things is that how do we encourage them to get all the resources and then also state with them depending on the choices that they're making. Sometimes when I think about first generation, I don't think about first generation students. I think about first generation employees, professionals, and how sometimes we are the first ones in our families to be in spaces where our careers are completely different than what our parents were doing before. And so it's a lot of learning, it's a lot of collaboration. And so I want to just once again thank you for the conversation here. Once again, we will be releasing a brief next week, directly with this information, where we speak about where do we go? Where do we go from here, given that COVID has completely redefined how everything is changing? And where do we go knowing what we know now, but also what is the next 5 years are going to look like? How do we transform the work that we're currently doing? So once again, thank you so much. We do have our Cafecito chats next, so that you can join us to learn more about supporting multilingual learners. And then also take a time for you to decompress a little bit. We know that there's a lot happening right now, and we need all the care that we can give ourselves. And so there is going to be a session to kind of understand a little bit more about supporting your own mental health. And then we'll be closing off the day with some remarks from Senator Schumer. So once again, thank yous to all of you, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Exit.